Cloud, and we're live. So I'm going to put my little thumb up so I know where to cue it, and we'll go for it. Welcome to Eyes Open on November 23rd, 2020. Julie, thanks for coming online here for another podcast.
Welcome. Thanks for doing this, Eric.
Yeah, of course. It's a season of Thanksgiving, and I'm feeling grateful today for many blessings in my life. I'm grateful for the privilege of doing these podcasts with you and for having a voice today. I've been thinking about how you have, throughout your life, there have been many attempts by the adversary to take your voice away, especially in recent years as you've gone more public with your story and your message. And I just wanted to see if you have any thoughts along, having a voice and during this time of Thanksgiving.
That's a lot right there, Eric. Yeah, I feel like in different ways the adversaries tried to take my voice away from the time I came to the planet. Even with simple things like having sinus and adenoid and tonsil problems as a kid. Like I had problems speaking and my throat would swell up and I would get all kinds of weird things, had my tonsils and adenoids out when I was 7. That was just one like little physical way, but then also sometimes like where I lived and the home I grew up in and things, some of the dynamics there. And then in my adult years as well. And like you mentioned, you've witnessed it as you've known me since going public with my story in a very physical way with adversarial attacks, as well as even just criticisms from people online, right? I don't know if that's what you're referring to, but
all the above.
Yeah. So the more Satan tries to shut me up, it has the opposite effect. For a few months now, until Friday when we did that podcast, I felt for a while like I wasn't supposed to do some podcasts, and that was for things going on in my personal life as well as just kind of like we mentioned burnout, but it was a lot deeper than that. It was me needing to regroup and get my voice back in different parts of my life. And then I started to kind of go into a little bit of a shutdown mode, a depression, because after having found my voice again and then going back into this place of feeling like I could not speak about what was going on with me, and even finding my voice in certain areas, but not being able to share publicly. And in most cases, even privately, what was really hurting my heart the most. On Tuesday of last week, one of my friends texted me and said something, and it was just kind of like what lit me up again. It triggered me to the point that I was like, you know what? Like, I am not going to just go away like Lucifer would like me to. So in an effort to get outside of myself and also clear energy on past probation for me and many other people, and to celebrate Thanksgiving this year, Eric has kindly agreed to do this podcast today called Thanksgiving Celebration. And I have had issues since I was a little girl about how we were taught in school, and because of that in our families in America, about the first Thanksgiving. And I'm not going to go into all the historical proof. I'm not going to cite articles or research any of that because, quite frankly, that's not what I do and I don't care. People can choose to believe me or not. I'm going to go purely on my memories from past probation and for what the Spirit has shown me both in my 2004 NDE as well as several night and day visions related to the first Thanksgiving. So that's today.
That
So
sounds
thanks,
exciting. I think it's great. I wouldn't have it any other way. It's when it comes right from your heart. I think that's what people really prefer to hear anyway. So where do you want to start? You want to go back to Jamestown or the Pilgrims coming across?
Right. Well, first of all, I have memory of the Mayflower. I was a young child on the Mayflower, actually got very sick on the Mayflower and died at the age of 5, right about the time the Mayflower hit land. So I don't have memory more than that, but I do have memory of a small child having traveled on the Mayflower through the eyes of a 5-year-old. But then also through the eyes of what they've shown me in vision, what some of the people suffered and endured on the Mayflower. And so I just want to acknowledge those who came over on the Mayflower for their courage and their bravery in coming over, and those that subsequently followed them seeking religious freedom. And not just religious freedom, but freedom in general, as those in England and in other countries had much of their agency stripped from them for thousands of years and had been passed down in those traditions in Europe. So I just want to acknowledge those who suffered that, and those that sought freedom, and reiterate and witness to each of you that this country, the United States of America, truly was founded at its basic element, its basic levels, on seeking religious freedom. And that's different than other countries on this planet. It's a part of history that is still, the Luciferians are still trying to erase, because they don't want people in the world, and especially in America, they don't want people to know the true history. And so they discredit Christopher Columbus. They discredit the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson, even George Washington. They twist and turn. And so maybe at some point we'll do some more on Christopher Columbus and Thomas Jefferson, some of those individuals that I met during my 2004 near-death experience, where I made promises to them that when I came back, I would try to correct the false history that had been told about them and about the founding of America. Having lived in Europe at the time, when this is another probation I had, when Christopher Columbus came to Spain and asked, well, he went to other countries too, but asked, and Queen Isabella and Ferdinand actually founded or funded Christopher Columbus's trip. They were God-fearing people as well, Isabella and Ferdinand, and they founded his trip or funded his trip as well. Christopher Columbus was not a rapist. There were those in his company that were, but he himself was not. So we'll talk about that another time. So we're fast forward, we got the Mayflower, and then we have the story of Pocahontas. That story is one that has grieved me greatly from the time I was a little girl and I heard about what they were saying about Pocahontas and her family and tribe. And what I want to say still is that the history that has been told, that is on the internet, and even in many of the books, is wrong. First of all, Disney did a total misnomer, which was calculated. They are owned, the Disney's owned by the Luciferians. And so what they've done is they've taken all these stories based on myths, which are actually based on true people, and they've twisted and turned it into these fairy tales that have been warped to create and quite honestly do some mind control techniques in little girls and boys from the time they are, toddlers.
Which is unfortunate. I mean, it's the most pervasive story that's in our face, and so it's the narrative that's in most of our minds. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, from the time they're little, and then Pocahontas, the story of Pocahontas, is no different. So Pocahontas' dad, he was a chief of one of the main tribes out near Jamestown. And for those that don't know where Jamestown was, it was in Virginia, Jamestown, Virginia. Jamestown, Virginia was actually the first colony of the United States, the first official colony of the 13 colonies. It was started by a group of men, and they were commissioned, specifically John Rolfe, R-O-L-F-E, was commissioned. He was in charge of Jamestown, helping, well, there were more people, there's more than that. I'm going to get ahead of myself. I'm not going to say who was totally in charge, because that gets into all the politics and all the history and what's been recorded and what hasn't. But all intents and purposes, what it turned into was John Rolfe was credited with successfully saving Jamestown. Now we back that up, and we hear in elementary school that the Pilgrims came and they shared corn and all this other, all these foods that they were growing in the United States, and that the Americans, the colonists became friends with the Native Americans, and then they had this big feast. And that's not how it went at all. And I'm not going to try to correct everything, but I'm just going to correct what the Spirit's been nagging me to correct for today. So in a nutshell, Pocahontas was a young girl. These men came into the area. They actually saw Pocahontas in the forest outside of her village. Some of them lusted upon her, and they also saw some others. Pocahontas was 14 and married at the age of 14 to a young boy in her tribe who was in line to become chief, because she was the chief's daughter, and he came from a prominent family in the tribe as well. They were married and they had one son. When John Smith, John Rolfe, and some other key players came, some of these men, there were half a dozen of them. Well, there's a story of John Smith that Disney tries to say there was a story or even a romance between John Smith and Pocahontas. He was a much older man. He did perv on her, and I will say he perved on her because he found her attractive and he had this kind of pedophilia energy towards her, but she did not have romantic feelings back to him. There was never any sexual relationship between them. That's something totally made up. That whole storyline's made up by Disney and really before Disney. So they did know each other, and I guess you could say they became friends because he became friends with the tribe. But it was all these American men, or soon to be American men, who were trying to use the Native Americans for everything from tobacco to their fur skins, to their jewelry, whatever the Native Americans had that these young settlers, these men, didn't have, including women. And so they would rape and pillage the villages of the Native Americans. And Pocahontas' village was no different. At some point in time, Jamestown was on its last leg. They were about to go completely under. They were starving. It was winter. It was awful. They were having no success with their crops of any kind. They had tried to grow tobacco. They couldn't get it to grow. But they noticed that Pocahontas' tribe was very successful in growing tobacco. And the tribe shared certain things with them, but they stole Pocahontas. They kidnapped her. They plundered the village. They murdered her husband, as well as her baby that she had with him. It was a little boy. They took her to Jamestown. They put her in a tent. They forced her to perform sexual acts on them. They raped her repeatedly. They all took turns. They forced her to cook and clean for them. And she was literally a prisoner and a slave in the camp of Jamestown. In exchange for John Rolfe to rescue her, as he would twist the story right along with his mother and other family members and members of Jamestown to cover what they were doing and to send word back to England, they went to Pocahontas' tribe and they said, John Rolfe will marry your daughter. We will have a union between your tribe, the Native Americans, and England or the Europeans, the members of Jamestown. You must give us, they blackmailed, they said, we will preserve her life. We won't kill her. You must give us your tobacco recipe. So the chief who loved his daughter, Pocahontas wasn't her real name. You'll have to look that up. I'd like you to do a little research. in an effort to save her life, he gave them the tobacco recipe. And this is, in fact, what financially saved Jamestown. Pocahontas and John Rolfe married. She was pregnant with their son. His name was Thomas. They named him Thomas. She was given the name of Rebecca, and she converted to Christianity. They forced her upon a boat across the ocean to England, locked her in a castle, and several castles actually, and then they paraded her around England, forcing her to wear British clothing, European clothing. Specifically, they taught her to dance, and well, she was already a good dancer, but Native American dancing, and they taught her European style of dancing, and then they paraded her around England as the savage who had been domesticated. This went on for 4 years. She was married to John Rolfe. The man who kidnapped her officially was best friends with John Rolfe. The night Pocahontas died, she died of poisoning. And that night she had had dinner with her husband, John Rolfe, and his best friend who had conspired to kidnap her. And she was poisoned by them, leaving her orphan son in the hands of her mother-in-law. Who was primarily responsible for caretaking and making sure that she stayed in order. And they would only let her out of her castle rooms when they needed her to show up at dinners or political events, balls and things like that. So you guys can see I have a lot of energy about this, a lot of emotion. I have a lot of anger, but I have a lot of heartache for what happened to Pocahontas, to her son. And it has weighed on my heart since the time I was about 6.
Julie, do you mind if I chime in here, give you a little break for a second? I know that you see things on an energetic level, past, present, and future. What do you see from a energetic, I guess, karmic standpoint with this story and the people involved today?
I know that later Pocahontas came back and the karma returned. Once again, she met John Rolfe. They married, and at some point in time, she woke up more. And karma returns unless you cut those abuse patterns. My heart goes out to Pocahontas and her family, those on both sides of the veil. I want to thank them for teaching me, helping me. Many of them are my spirit guides. Many of them are my protectors. I even have a joke with some of my other bodyguards that are on this side of the veil, because some of the bodyguards that I have that are Native American on the other side of the veil, like they legit will wear, kind of Native American loincloths and stuff. And Eric, I think I've joked with you that I'm like, I have the hottest bodyguard just to see them in their loincloth, But in all honesty, like, they protect me. And I want to thank all of the Native Americans, wherever you are on this planet or in spirit realm, and let you know that I love you very much. My heart goes out to you for what you have suffered and for the sacrifices you have made so that the United States of America could come into fruition, so that, as prophesied thousands of years ago, this country could truly become yet again another promised land, as it was once a promised land when Lehi came to America prior to, thousands of years ago. It has been a promised land multiple times while on this planet. And we will yet again see more promises fulfilled as Christ returns first to the heartland of the United States of America, and New Jerusalem is set up here. And I look forward to working with more Native Americans as we move towards the return of Christ, as I know the Hopi and the Navajo and many of the tribes have prophesied of things coming and the great white God, which will come again. And I just want them to hear me when I say that I love you and I appreciate you. And I know this is like the quickest version ever of one of the many, many stories we have that have been mistold related to the history of this world and specifically the United States. But because I could go into stuff on Lewis and Clark too, right? But there's just so much, and there's so much emotion, and there's been so much heartache on this planet and on this land. And as I'm out here in the West, as I have fled from Kansas and have come west, and having had many probations here, I've been Native American several times in past lives, and I feel a real connection to the West out in the mountains. And when I used to live in Arizona, you know, different connections and memories and visions that would come from those past lives. And I just am very grateful that I'm at this place and I can heal from some of the things that I've seen, that I remember, and that I've experienced. And I hope that in so doing, it will help some of my other ancestors heal as well.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for opening your heart and sharing some of these things that are really personal to you. I might just chime in and just act as a second witness to what Julie said about Native Americans, and maybe by extension a little bit all those minorities. I know the Lord does have a special place in his heart for them, for those racial groups, for their contributions. And I know that he has big plans for them in the future as well. So
right.
It will be exciting to see those things unfold.
Right. And you know, Lucifer's trying to put it out there that I'm racist and anti-gay and all that. And it's so crazy. I have two sisters that are homosexual, lesbians, and partnerships, and I love them and I love their partners. I have family members. I've got several nieces and nephews, a couple that are part African American, part Honduran and Mexican, right? If anybody knew my heart and they knew even just my current family circumstance, they would know that I'm like the farthest thing from racist. And I just want to see us unified as a people, coming together on the things we have in common, which hopefully means we're coming together in Christ, because that's what bonds us, you know? And so anyway, with that, I just want to wish everyone a very happy Thanksgiving. I know this is a heavy message. Hopefully it helps you clear. I don't want anybody feeling guilty when they eat their turkey and their corn and their potatoes, but I can tell you that this year I'm not doing that. I joked with a friend, maybe I'd go get Chinese food or Thai food or something, but I do know that the God is aware, and he looks upon each and every one of us in our heart, and that he loves the Native American people. And anyway, I love you guys too. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. I don't know if we'll do any more podcasts between now and when we do the one for Christmas Eve, but I think that'll probably be the next one. So anyway, love you guys. Thank you. Eric, thanks.
Thanks, Julie. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Thanks for chiming in.
Love you guys.